right, so this is our third class in our character development. So far, your 2 weeks, your character should be like pretty, somewhat developed, not fully, because we have this week and next week to develop the rest of your character. I want to continue with the great Maimonides, the Rambam. Last week we spent a lot of time on anger, but I want to read with you in the Hebrew and in the English some more ideas about tshuva in general, which is the Hebrew word for returning to God. And we usually associate that idea with doing more mitzvos, staying away from averos, staying away from sins. And what the Rambam is about to introduce is this idea that tshuva is not only about what you do or not, or you don't do. It's also who you become. It's the personality that you develop. And I'm speaking about this on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. It's easy to change a habit superficially, just behaviorally, just change what you do. But if you really want to get to the root of why we do the things we do, and anybody know what researchers teach? Thank you so much. How much of our daily activities are thank you very much, my friend. I really appreciate it. How many of our daily activities are controlled by habit? Anybody know?
90%?
45%. According to modern research. Excuse me. Thank you. Chaim.
Right.
So if we really want to get to the root of our habits, you really have to get to your personality, because you can kind of change the superficial, you can kind of pull the weeds out, but if you don't get to the root, they're just going to grow right back. You'll maybe be able to continue a good habit a couple of times, but if you're not really getting to why you're doing the habit, or if it's a bad habit, you want to get rid of it. If it's a good habit, you want to start it. You have to really see yourself in a certain kind of way, and you have to actually be in a certain kind of way, and then the actions are evidence of your personality. Habits are ultimately supposed to be expressions of who we are internally. And we can deal with it superficially sometimes, but it's not going to last. I'm speaking about that in the first day of Rosh Hashanah, but it's connected to this. Take a look what the Rambam says. Al Tomar, a person should never say, She'ein tshuva ela me'averot sheyesh bahem maseh, that there's only tshuva from sins that involve a maseh. Maseh is an action. You shouldn't think, says the Rambam, that Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we're trying to do tshuva now, we're trying to return to Hashem, get better. You shouldn't think that you should only be thinking about transgressions that involve some sort of action. Kagon, for example, znut, lewdness, some sort of sexual immorality, gezel, theft, geneva. Gezel is actually robbery. Geneva is theft. What's the difference between robbery and theft? I remember learning this in law school. The first difference between a gazlan and a ganav.
Gazlan is the rabbin.
Good. A gazlan is someone who does it in the open. A ganav is someone who wears a mask and who does it in a sort of a stealth, like undercover. Why should there be a difference? Which is considered worse, by the way? A gazlan or a ganav?
Gazlan.
Now you would think a gazlan is worse, and under American law it is, because a robber who uses intimidation or force is considered a worse crime than someone who steals at night. But in halacha, it's different. Why is a ganav, the person who steals at night secretly, considered worse than a gazlan, than someone who robs you, in the street face to face?
It's probably more terrifying in a certain way to not see who the person is and see a mask and think of it coming at night somewhere.
So I think that the reason for American law, British common law really, is that the other one gets a worse sentence, a robber, because there's intimidation or force. And therefore the other one is a little lighter.
At least there's more consistency in the open robbery. You're not hiding.
Okay, keep going. You got to think a little godly now. Because if a guy is robbing at night,
as opposed to the courage to face you,
he almost knows what he's doing is wrong.
He knows what he's doing is wrong. He's hiding it. What does it have to do with God? One of them involves God a little more. That's why Judaism is a little more strict about it.
On the Geneva part.
On the Geneva. Because a Ganav thinks he's not being seen.
Oh.
Thinks he's being sneaky.
He's like, as long as these people don't see me, I'm okay. He's, in a sense, denying that God is watching too.
He's denying what he's doing in a way also because he thinks he's...
Because he thinks it's completely, it doesn't exist. If these people don't see me, then what else do I have to worry about? Right? In fact, in the Torah, whenever the Torah talks about money and about being ethical when it comes to money, it keeps using the term "v'yareita melokecha," and you shall fear God. And the rabbis ask, why is that phrase "you shall fear God" always used in terms of money crimes, financial crimes?
Easy to be like sneaky with money if someone doesn't really know what's going on, so you have more room to deceive someone or to steal from them in that
Exactly. And therefore the only real impediment would be if you think there is another force at play other than the person you're stealing from or anyone else watching. You know, this is sort of where the theology comes in, which is interesting. So difference between a ganav and geneva is a little different. And so anyway, the Rambam's just giving that as an example of something that is, you have to do tshuva. Now, by the way, as an aside, let's say you did steal money from somebody, how do you repent from that? How do you do tshuva from
First
that?
give them back the money.
First, you have to give them back the money. You can't go to shul and go, Salachna, I'm sorry, and talk to God, and you still have the cash.
It's a crime against a person.
Right. It's a crime against a person, which has to be taken. Therefore, you have to take care of the person first. Not only return the money, but also apologize. This is the week, by the way, that we start apologizing. If there's anything. I just picked up the message. Somebody who came to visit us in our home Shabbos late afternoon. She just called. She's such a sweet person. She came to visit us. We're very close friends with them. And she knocked on the door, and we were all like napping. So somebody woke up from the knock and got up, and she called. This is like at least 6 weeks ago. She's like, I just wanted to ask forgiveness. Because 6 weeks ago I knocked on your door and I woke up everyone. I'm like, we didn't even, it was like a very thoughtful. So if you think for some reason you did something to offend somebody, you woke them up when they were trying to sleep, you stole money from them. So these are action types of
Does that include like people from like a random store, like place, like let's say like a random doctor's office you went to that you might have kind of like raised your voice at someone because you got annoyed?
Technically, if you screamed or yelled at someone and was not justified, even if you screamed or yelled, we talked about this last week, and it was justified. I mean, meaning you were justified to get upset. You're not supposed to try to. Yeah, I know. That's why a lot of people spend a lot of time asking for forgiveness, because we mess up a lot, especially with other people. All right, so these are examples of action offenses. Ela kishem shetzarich adam lashuv me'elu. Now the Rambam's making the point that just like a person has to try to do tshuva from these things, kachu tzarich lechapes b'deot. Similarly, a person should also try to do tshuva and introspect in his deot. The word deot means his qualities. Deot raot are bad qualities. What's a bad quality? Like, it's something you probably wouldn't put on your resume. Like anger easily, little patience. Whatever it is, whatever the word is. Like, but everyone, we all know we have our stuff.
Emotionally cruel.
What's that?
Being emotionally cruel. Other people.
Emotionally cruel. Okay, definitely.
I just thought of another term.
Yeah.
I thought of emotionally.
So we're supposed to think about like at this time of the year, we're supposed to think about like what qualities do I need to improve? Sheyeshu v'lashuv min hakas. Look what the first example he gives, and to do tshuva from kas, anger, umin ha'eva, or hatred, umin ha'kina, or from jealousy, umin ha'itul. Hitul is frivolity. Frivolity, which is like you're just blowing off everything. Nothing means anything. Now let's go through each one a little down below. Oh wait, a few more. Miradifas ha'mamon v'ha'kavod, running after money and honor. Now we all run after. I think we all run. I don't know. I've never met anyone where the money just sort of meets them at the door. You have to do a little running. What he's saying is that you're just pursuing money for the sake of money, and honor for the sake of honor. And we know from other great passages of the sages that those are things you'll never catch up with, especially honor. It says anyone who runs after honor, it's not something you'll ever find. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything in life to become worthy of honor. But simply running after it like money for its own sake, that's a problem. And Meridifat HaMacholot, he says running after food, which is interesting. Well, let's get into these. He says, V'kayotza ben min hakol tzarich lachzor b'tshuva. From all of these things, we have to try to do tshuva. Ve'elu avonot kashim me'otam sheish b'hem masa. This is very interesting. He says, these sins are harder to repent from than other sins that involve an action. If you steal, if you're sexually promiscuous, if you're, I don't know, whatever actions that we want to improve on, he says those are easier to improve on than to change if you have an anger issue, like we talked about last week, or if you're jealous, or if you're constantly running after honor. There's a famous line from Yisrael Misalant. He started the ethicist movement in Judaism, and he said that it's easier to master 100 pages of Talmud than it is to change one quality of your personality. And it is not easy to Rabbi Yisrael Misalant. And it is not easy to master 100 pages of Talmud. It's not easy to master one page of Talmud, let alone 100. So this is a very important thing to remember. Like, he's saying you got to do it, and he's acknowledging that it's hard. And I don't necessarily think you do it overnight. This can take weeks, months, even years. And as long as you're working on it, that's the most important thing. Now, what I would like to do is just run through, each of these things.
Question?
Yeah, Barry, go for it.
When it talks about anger, is it talking about, like, let's say something happens, you feel angry inside, is it talking about including feeling angry inside, or like in having a reaction, or is it include actually acting at or reacting out?
So number one, acting on the anger. And it's interesting, according to the Rambam, do you remember what we said last week about anger? What did the Rambam say last week about anger? Not only should you not display anger, but you shouldn't
feel it.
You should actually internally feel it.
Yeah.
And at sometimes it is appropriate to display it. Like, what's an example? But not actually feel it.
Like if your kids do something wrong.
Good.
And you have to act like
Excellent.
upset, but you can't actually be upset because then you might act irrational.
Right. You're not.
Like anti-Semitic attack.
I don't know. When I read this, I often get a little like, it's so difficult. Like, to be so disciplined with your emotions that that's something that is it's something that is worthy of displaying anger, but you shouldn't feel it. I'm just reading you what he wrote, okay? And I'm not saying I can disagree with it. This is the Rambam, but it's just very, very difficult to get to.
What does it mean to display it or not feel it?
I mean, the example you just
Like
gave.
you act angry, or like you speak as if you're angry, but inside you're not feeling angry.
Oh.
The kids run into the street. You have a little kid. He runs into the street. If you are like so chill, and you pull the kid, and the car goes by, and thank God the child's okay, and you don't say anything, and you're totally chill, what's going to happen the next time the kid sees a car? He's going to run into the street again. Or he gave another example of a rabbi of a community. If a rabbi of a community sees something really off in the community, I don't know, people are having extramarital affairs in their congregation with each other. This happened. And the rabbi says nothing about it. Rabbi's chill, he's cool, because he wants to continue to be liked by everyone. His contract is up, rabbis have get paid too by their congregation, unlike the Manhattan Jewish experience. But most synagogues run that way, so he doesn't say anything. What's going to happen? People are going to continue to do it. So ideally, and I'm not saying, I don't know how people can do this, but ideally, that person, that parent should not feel anger inside, but display a little so the kid learns. That rabbi should not feel any anger for his congregants inside, but say something and look like he's upset. Because the Rambam says that anger, the emotion of anger, is such an internally destructive force. And like you said before, it causes you to say and do really things that we're embarrassed of later. The best thing is to try to get yourself to a place where you never actually feel it. But you need to display it sometimes. I know, I'm laughing too.
Does it sound different when you display it and don't feel it than if you do feel it?
What's that?
Does it sound different if you display it and don't feel it versus do feel it and display it?
I mean, wait, I missed that.
Does it sound different, let's say the parent who doesn't feel it but displays it.
Right.
Well, the parents sound different in that case versus if they do feel it and display it.
That doesn't mean they're indifferent. It means they've somehow controlled their
No, but
emotions.
will it sound different to the child if they are feeling it instead of not feeling it?
Welcome.
It might not be overly cruel.
So
It'll come out differently? Do they feel
It might come out the same, but you reduce like the risk of
You know what you can learn from this? Even if you can't go as far as the Rambam is advocating, which is not to feel anything, just hearing that's a goal, maybe that'll help us feel a little less and try to absorb things that happen to us in life with a little more, and listen, there are very high-level people in the world, Jews and non-Jews alike, who have more control of their emotions, and you can learn. Yeah, please.
No, I'm just trying to think of like times of anger, in the Torah, and I was thinking for Moses, I guess hitting the rock was an expression of anger.
According to Maimonides, that was what Moses did that was wrong.
Yeah.
That he lost it. He blew his cool.
What about when he threw the... Why he wasn't allowed in Eretz Yisrael?
He wasn't allowed into Israel because he hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. When he threw the tablets down, God, according to the rabbis, gave him a big sort of yeshakach, pat on the back.
That was displaying
because that was
feeling it.
That makes sense.
And by the way, that whole lesson there.
Maybe he
It's
felt
a very
it.
powerful lesson. What was the symbolism in taking these tablets, these physical tablets, and smashing them? Given what he just saw going on in the Jewish camp, what were they doing? They were worshiping a golden calf, and they were saying, "This is our God." So he took the tablets and he smashed them, and he said, "There's nothing that's physical, even these tablets, that is worthy of being worshipped. Only God gets worshipped." That's the whole fundamental, importance of Judaism. So the smashing of the tablet was actually part of the lesson he was trying to teach them.
That's where you display it.
Yeah.
I have a
Please.
question.
Yeah.
So what about feeling very cynical about everything? It's you're not necessarily expressing that you're angry, but you just are very disappointed. You just feel like you just feel the worst about everything because
Right.
you just have seen everything is really bad. I don't
Yeah,
know
he
if
doesn't
that's
mention that as a core quality, but I cannot imagine. Is that a general thing, or is that someone is in a funk? Like someone gets cynical at a certain time in their life, or that's just a quality. I guess we all have friends who are a little more cynical, all the time.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's you can feel very cynical about things because you're in a bad mood about something.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah. There's some people who are just always very cynical.
So I wonder if that's a poor quality in and of itself, or it's a poor quality that's going to lead to other negative things. Because when you're cynical, you can't take the person you're talking to seriously. You can't take the subject matter seriously. You can't really learn very much in life when you're cynical, because you think you know it all. It's whatever.
I don't know.
That's why adolescents are difficult, because there's a cynicism but that's part of the developmental process. There's a famous teaching on the 4 sons on Passover. You have the 4 sons: the son who can't even ask, and the son who's simple, and then the wicked son, and then so everyone's well, who's the wicked son? Is there really a wicked son? And then there's the chacham, the wise son. So some say it's really one person going through different stages of life. We all start out she'eno yodei lishal, can't even speak. We don't even know enough to ask. And then when we get a little older, but we're still little, you're a tom, you're simple. I remember when my kids were little. Is he good? Is he bad? We used to watch every movie, good or bad. There was nothing in between. And then you go through a period of adolescence where you become a little cynical and you start challenging everything, just for the sake of challenging. And that might be the rebellious son. And then hopefully they grow out of it and become a chacham. It's very optimistic.
I like that.
Another question?
Yeah, please.
Why couldn't Moshe after he hit the rock, why did he have to get kept up later? Why couldn't he do tshuva like we're talking about and then
That's
go
a very
into
good
the
question.
That's always bothered me.
Yeah, he also prayed, according to the Midrash, 515 times to go in, and God said, "Enough, stop praying. You're not going in."
If he would have prayed one more time, he would have been like,
Apparently, that's what it seems like. We can do tshuva. It doesn't mean God always accepts the tshuva. I also think that it was, Moshe's job was to take the Jews out of Egypt and get them through the wilderness. His job was not to bring them into Israel. That was Joshua's job. Not everybody has to do everything. And I think that's an important lesson also that we learn from that. But in terms of his own relationship with Hashem, the only way I can understand it is by not evaluating Moses the same way any one of us would get evaluated. Like if any of us hit a rock as opposed to speaking to it. But for Moshe, the slightest infraction, person on that high spiritual level, the slightest infraction is a major, major thing, especially because it was so public. That's where the pasuk says in the Torah, Ya'an lo hamantim li, God says to Moshe, because you did not believe in me, lahakdisheni, to sanctify me in the eyes of the nation. Now, water coming from a rock because you spoke to it is much cooler than water coming from a rock after you hit it. And God was saying that, yeah, it's still a miracle that you can hit a rock and water comes out, but it's not as miraculous as just talking to it. And that's what God wanted the people to see. And Moshe failed to deliver that. And for Moshe, that's like a major thing. That's the only way I can understand it. You got a question?
Yeah, so it was about the first kind of like sub-bullet here where it says that anyone who becomes angry is considered as if he worshipped idols. That's a pretty strong statement. Can you...
Yeah, who remembers that from last week? I think I quoted that last week. It's a passage from the Talmud. Anyone who gets angry is as though they're kilo ovdei avodah zarah, as though they worshipped idols. So here's my explanation. You can take it or leave it, and I'm sure there are better ones than this. Why do we get angry? Like physiologically. Why does the body... Because when you get angry, you feel something different. You start to perspire, you get like all... Huh?
Like your cortisol levels.
Hormonally, you're different.
When you don't get something you want.
Fight or flight. That's technically the reason.
Okay.
The body is preparing you to run away or attack. Just because we have an animal part of us. Okay, so, and as a result, the hormones are shooting all over the place, and there's less oxygen that's reaching the thinking centers. We know this physiologically. And when there's less oxygen reaching the thinking centers, we say and we do stupid things. That's why people always recommend just count to 10. Because, not just count. You have to breathe. You got to breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Slow breathing for 10 seconds can actually help more oxygen come to the brain, and you can calm down and think a little more rationally. So maybe that's an explanation. This is the way Hashem hardwired us. What does it mean that you become someone else? There's like a demon that takes over you. Now that didn't really explain that passage. This is explaining the passage. Why do we get angry most of the time, though? We get angry most of the time because...
It didn't go our way.
Yeah. I've been so angry, it's a week before Rosh Hashanah. And this is the hardest week of my year. And my back goes out. I'm like, hello? Couldn't you have done this last week, 2 weeks ago? Because according to my timetable, I have to write a certain amount of sermons, and I have to get a certain amount of people in the door, raise a certain amount of money. All this has to be done. The bad back, this is not working with my schedule. What does that say? If I get angry then? And I'm basically saying that I'm denying that there's this other force in the world that's running the show. Because if I know that I'm not really running the show, how could I get angry? I'm only getting angry because I think I can control everything. I can't control everything. Now, I kind of deep down know that, but I forget that a lot. And that's why we get angry. Because if you would actually have that in the forefront of your mind, you wouldn't get angry.
Like this is all part of the plan. It's for my benefit. I just have to trust that.
If I really believe that, then when something went wrong, I'd be okay with it because I'd be like, it's probably part of my growth. Hashem wants me to deal with this situation somehow. This is what I need. What an opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, how many of us actually say that? It's probably annoying to listen to if somebody else would. If somebody told you, oh, your back went out so you can I was just like, no, thank you. I don't want to hear that right now. But that's what happens. That's my explanation about sort of
distinguish, like that, not getting angry and thinking, oh, this is all, can't get angry because then I'm thinking I'm in control, or I know what the plan is more than God or something, versus something bad happens or something does something to you that would make you angry, or some injustice happens, versus not letting yourself lose, not being motivated like still being motivated to pursue justice and realizing that was wrong.
Right. That doesn't mean just because you can accept it as reality doesn't mean you don't do something about it. And you're supposed to confront evil. You're supposed to take out evil. That's the mitzvah to destroy Amalek. But when Amalek attacks, the idea is not to get angry at God. The idea is to get angry at Amalek.
So you are supposed to be angry at Amalek?
Yeah, I think so. We don't believe in turn the other cheek. And there is a mitzvah to hate. I know it's not very popular. There is a mitzvah to hate evil people, not just Amalek. There's a verse in the Torah from which we derive a mitzvah to hate evil people. And you really can't, the truth is, you really can't effectively fight badness if you don't get people riled up against it. Some believe that one of the reasons why the church did not actively oppose the Third Reich, the church as an institution, like the Vatican, this is being malamed zechut, this is giving them the benefit of the doubt, actually, is not because there was so much anti-Semitism embedded within Christianity, which unfortunately there was for centuries, was that because of the church's teachings that everybody is a sinner and everybody deserves to be loved because we're tainted and born sinners, then you just have to turn the other cheek when evil presents itself. And Judaism vehemently disagrees with that. If you want to read a great article on this, my colleague and friend Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik, who's a rabbi here at Spanish Portuguese on the Upper West Side, wrote a phenomenal article about hate. It was printed in a publication called Azur. Just Google Meir Soloveitchik and hate. I know he doesn't want to be associated with that, but he makes a very, very powerful case. Shmuley Boteach also writes about this a lot, that if you tell everybody that you're only supposed to love everyone, even the unrepented. That's what I'm saying. We always accept people's tshuva. A Russia, an evil person could do tshuva, but they have to stop the badness they're doing. If they don't stop the badness and they continue in their evil ways, then there's no mitzvah to. Let's say somebody comes over to you, they did something really nasty, and then they ask you for your forgiveness, but they're not sincere. They don't mean it. And how do you know? Because they keep doing it. They keep repeating the sin against you. Do you have responsibility to forgive them under Jewish law? Christians say yes. And the more you can forgive, the more unrepented and the more you forgive, the better of a Christian you are. You're not a good Jew if you do that.
We do what?
You have no responsibility to accept someone's forgiveness if it's not sincere, if it's not real.
Is it bad to do that?
Yeah, I think so. Because you're allowing the other person to continue. And you're allowing yourself to be walked over. You have to have a certain sense of self and some integrity. You're not a shmata. You can't just it's okay, keep beating me up. No, you have to. Why do we have a rule of self-defense? You're allowed to kill someone else to protect your own life. So it's no different on the emotional level.
So you're not supposed to get angry means not at God, not necessarily someone who does something wrong.
Exactly.
Oh.
God, there's a difference. God gets the big exception because we believe that everything God does is for the best.
We have free will, and the other person is choosing to do it also.
Correct. Very good.
Okay.
All right, this is heavy. All right, let's do a little more. But that was a great question about how do you understand that. Hatred, anyone who holds hatred for another Jew in his heart violates one of the Torah's prohibitions. This is very appropriate. You're not supposed to hate a fellow Jew. Now, what happens if a fellow Jew is really, upsetting you, and they haven't apologized? What do?
Tell them that
You have to say something, because a lot of us don't want to do that because we don't want to be confrontational, so we don't say anything, we sweep it under the rug. But then what happens? Now you've got a problem. You have resentment, and you're not supposed to have that. And the only way to get the resentment, to get it off your chest, is to say something. I have a little thing in my 40-day challenge: if you see something, say something. Now you got to be careful. It's not like every single time somebody upsets you, you're not going to have any friends. You're going to be like that annoying, oversensitive person. Nobody likes a person like that either. You have to know, what can I live with, and what's really irking me. And if it's irking you, say something. But there's a talent to this. It's not a science. It's an art. It's a mitzvah, by the way. To do that, by the way, is one of the 613 mitzvot. It says, "Hochiach tochiach et amitecha Reprove your neighbor. No, it starts, Lo tisnat achicha b'vavecha. It's in Leviticus in chapter 19. It says, reprove your neighbor. Say something. Oh, I'm sorry. Lo tisnas achicha, but don't hate, reprove, and don't bear sin. So what does it mean, don't bear sin? What sin? The sin of harboring hate. How might you end up violating the sin of harboring hate? By failing to say something to the other person. So you have to really say something. But, maybe we can develop ourselves to have a little of a thicker skin sometimes, to be able to handle a certain amount, because no one's perfect. And you're not going to keep friends if you're not forgiving. You do need to be a forgiving person. But they have to know what you're upset about. And sometimes we're oblivious. Sometimes people have brought to my attention, Rabbi, when you said that, it really, and I had no idea I had offended a person with a certain comment. Or I couldn't come to something and I thought I told them why I couldn't be there and I didn't show. Literally this back thing, I was supposed to go Sunday morning to Cherry Hill to Simcha. One of our MGE alumni had another kid, and I was supposed to go to the bris, and I told him I was coming, and I couldn't get into the car. I really, really tried. This 2-hour trip, I couldn't find a position. So I called him up, and I wanted to make sure, because it's a big deal, So the idea is to try to go through life like that, but you don't know who you've offended. You don't know. And that's why if you're on good terms with a friend, they can tell you. They can say. And here's a little trick. I don't know if I shared this last week. If you do want to bring something up with someone that you offended, here's a good trick. I was thinking of not sharing this with you, but I really value our friendship. And then say it. Start that way. Say, the reason I'm sharing it is because I value our friendship. Guess what? If you didn't care about the friendship, you wouldn't say anything, because you wouldn't care. He's a jerk, and I'm not going to have anything to do with him. The biggest proof that you care, that you want to maintain a relationship with this person, is that you say something. Or else just walk away. Sometimes you do walk away because it's like, I'm never going to see that jerk again. What's the matter? What's the point? But if you really want to have relationships with people, it's very, very important. Okay, so this is hard. This is hard stuff. What about pursuit of money and honor? So he quotes the Rambam from elsewhere. A person should not possess a greedy spirit, lusting after money. He should not be envious or desiring of things or pursuing honor. So I just want to say, I think this has gotten much more complicated in the social media age, because I don't think we've ever been bombarded so much with other people's things. Like, I used to know about other people's business a little. And now I know everybody's business, because they're taking me into their living room and they're showing me their beautiful furniture and their this and I redid the kitchen and look how beautiful it is. And I'm not saying that's prohibited to do. We'll put Facebook out of business if that was. But we should think about the posts that we make, because it does create envy in other people. It does. Anybody ever hear of a concept of ayin hara? Ayin hara is called the evil eye. Everyone thinks it's this very deep Kabbalistic thing, and it is. But there's an easy rational explanation. What's the evil eye? When you shine too much of a spotlight on your own good. You're supposed to try not to, like, you may have a lot of money, and it's okay to have nice things, but, and I don't know, this is super gray, but there's a point where it's like, you don't have to keep reminding everybody of it, because it does create in other people. But I remember I gave that example of, did I say that last week when I was with my daughter? We rented a boat when we were in Florida like a year ago. She took a great picture, and she was about to pop it on her Instagram feed. And right before she was going to do it, and I said, maybe you shouldn't do that. And she's like, oh, and then she mentions her friend's name. She just mentioned her friend who found out that all of her friends were going away on winter vacation. They're all going to these cool places. And the family really doesn't have the money to take a vacation in general, and certainly not to Florida. And it's a given for a lot of people, so it's not a big deal. But she was like, yeah, she's going to probably see it. And then, how come I'm not on a boat in Florida? So it's a little thing like that. And it's a big deal for high school kids, for adolescents. You know, the whole FOMO thing is major. Or, like I said to my daughter on another occasion, either you invite the whole class or there's no party. Or if you're going to have a few people, it has to be a very small group so that the other people don't start, and no post-it. Because some other kid will be wondering, I thought we were good friends. We're not such good friends? Why doesn't she like me anymore? You know, like, this, I know it sounds small, but it's being sensitive. And it's a big deal, the whole envy thing. Yeah, it's a big deal. They say, by the way, I once went to somebody, you know, we honor people at our annual dinners at MJE. It's a way of raising money. So I went to somebody who's very, very wealthy, and I asked them if they would be honored at the dinner. And they were like, and I'm sitting in this like crazy palatial home, there's like gold dripping from the ceilings. And they were like, no, we're a little concerned about the ayin hara. So I'm like, you are? Really? Yeah, we don't want our names up, you know, and I hear that. Giving charity, by the way, the highest level of giving charity is to do it anonymously. But, and I said this to them, they still said no, but I said this to them, that there are exceptions to every rule. And one exception is if you're showing off, or whatever it is to help somebody in some way, or to raise money for like a worthy cause. That's how money gets raised. Fancy schmancy person throws a party, invites their friends, they want to see their beautiful home, we're giving $10,000, and then the other ones, if the Jones are doing it, we're the Schwartzes, we got to keep up. And there's a certain thing, that's how non-for-profits sustain themselves. Yeah, it's not so great. It's not so great. But, you know, if it's directed in a good way, some say, therefore, that you don't have to be concerned with the ayin hara. We're not doing this for, you know, our own personal grandeur. We're doing this to help the organization. I don't know how you feel about that.
It's gray area.
It is gray.
It's like when people donate like wings of a hospital and they have like their name on it. Like you know that
Yeah.
they're keeping that the hospital, this part was built because of their donation, but then it's just like, yeah.
Show offy too.
It is show-offy, but here's what I would say. Let's say there's a name, and someone else would not give money had they not seen that name because they want to get their names up there too. Then I think it's worth it, because the hospital needs the money. The more important value is getting the money to the cause, to the poor people, to the sick people. But if it's not going to do anything, it's just going to be a name, then much better to make it anonymous. That's my opinion.
But
Yeah.
it helps other people wanting to.
I have to tell you something. That's why we look at it. There's a plaque right there. You know, the joke is, you know, you go to the bathroom. How come there's no plaque next to the urinal? Like there should be a plaque everywhere. You didn't. That little, that little schmitchick over there. We should have had that, donated by somebody.
Who's gonna want their name next to the urinal?
When you see
I'm
their
sorry.
name, you
I made a very
say,
crass
"Oh."
joke. I mean, I'm just.
No, I'm saying that's the point of planning with the name there.
Otherwise, they would.
Someone would donate their.
But it does get people to give. It does.
It's probably
It makes
like a
people feel, oh, this is more legit. People.
It's more legit, and also my rabbi, he should rest in peace, Rabbi Grimblatt, started every appeal in my synagogue with his own pledge, and everybody knew there what he was making. It was not a lot of money, and when he started off, he said, the Rebbitzin and I are pledging $500 for this cause, and everybody knows he's on a very tight budget, and they're like, that greased the wheels. Because someone who's sitting there is making 10 times what the rabbi. He's like, he's not going to give 500. He's got to give 2,500. It helps. We're human. You got to kind of deal with the reality. If we were on a higher level, people listen. I have donors. I don't have to call them. They don't want their name anywhere. They just want to do the right thing and move on with their life. There are such people in this world. and God bless them. Okay, they make my life a lot easier. They don't need any kavod, they don't need any honor. And then there are other people who, need a little greasing the wheels.
Yeah.
Or you take them out for a drink. That's what we're going to do on Simchas Torah, by the way. Before we do the auction, we always give out a couple of, drinks. All right, that's money and honor. It helps. People actually give more, and then they don't remember what they pledged. A Torah scholar should not be a glutton. Pursuit of gluttony, he said. We should not be running after physical things so much. Here's what he says. A Torah scholar should not be a glutton, but rather only eat food which is necessary for the health of his body. Even then, he should not overindulge. He should not be like those who constantly seek to fill their stomachs. Okay, so he says you shouldn't deprive yourself. You should eat healthily, but try not to eat so much more than that. And he says a Torah scholar, because he's supposed to, I guess, be a model for other people. Frivolity, person should not be characterized by laughter or frivolity. A sage has said, laughter and lightheartedness accustom a person to lewdness. Rather, they command that a person should neither be uncontrolled in frivolity nor sad as if in mourning. Rather, he should greet all people with a cheerful countenance. So I spoke about this last week. What is the demeanor, the ideal demeanor that we're supposed to try to carry ourselves with generally? So he says, Rambam is very into the middle, Aristotelian golden mean. You shouldn't walk around like the whole world's on your shoulders, sad, depressed. And you shouldn't walk around like you're always at a party. Like everything, it's fake. He says, Besever panim yafot, which is a quote from the Ethics of Our Fathers. Panim is a face. Yafot means nice, like a nice countenance, but cheerful, but not overly. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's like, I'm going to walk around the way I'm feeling. So if I'm in a good mood, I'm going to be really cheerful. And if I'm in a crappy mood, I'm going to walk around like I'm feeling. He does not advise that. He advises always to walk around with a cheerful countenance. And I had a little chapter called Smile in my... is that yours?
It is fine.
I have the same one. No, it's fine. In my book, The 40-Day Challenge, thank you. I didn't even know you had it in there. You're good. So I have a chapter called Smile where, page 27, I started with a song that Nat King Cole made famous. You know the song? It's called Smile. It's really sweet. Smile though your heart is aching. Smile even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by if you'll just smile. So this is based on the whole concept of acharei ha'pa'ulot nimshechu halevavot, that after one's actions follow one's heart. We don't always have to just act according to the way we feel. We can actually produce different feelings based on our actions. It can go the other way around. If you put a smile on your face, it actually makes you happier. Now, it's a Band-Aid. It's temporary. It's not going to produce long-term happiness. But for those few moments, it makes you and other people more happy. And I wrote in here, one second. Yeah, I quoted Dr. David Pelkovitz, leading professor of psychology, that the first and last 30 seconds... Oh, this is something else. That's not really related. What's it doing in this? Oh, smiling or positive gestures or comments trigger happiness within ourselves. And when we smile... By the way, it's a cute little trick you can do on someone. If I smile to you, most people smile right back, just almost instinctively.
It's contagious.
Yeah, it is. And it can actually help change like a mood a little. It can help change like the energy in the room, even just temporarily. So it's a very, very important thing. But he said here that the middle path between frivolity and depression is simcha, which means happiness. And therefore everyone should greet everyone in a cheerful manner, and try to act towards other besimcha, not a fake type of joy where you're smiling, laughing at everything, pretending that everything is always wonderful. And at the same time, we should also refrain from becoming despondent and instead greet people with a smile. Now, does that contradict that what you feel in your heart should be as the same that's on your lips? You should be what's called tochel kaboro, the Rambam says. Your outside should be like your inside. You shouldn't be like double-faced. Two-faced, what's the expression? what is it? Tooth or two-face? Two-face, not tooth. Two-face.
Like the bad
Right? You should be
villain.
really a wholesome person. Like what you see is what you get. People like people like that. Like salt of the earth. Like what you see is what you get. But if you're not feeling so wonderful in here, it's not being insincere or deceitful by looking a little more cheerful than you're feeling. What you're trying to do is use the outside. Why do we get dressed up for things? It makes us feel more special. Why do we prepare, take a shower for something, get ready? Those little things actually matter. The way we dress, the way we present ourselves to other people can have an impact on the way we're feeling. Again, I don't think it can change in a deep way, but I think superficially it can start, getting someplace. Anyway, so that's what he's saying here. Let's just do a little more. Next week, by the way, next week is going to be right before Yom Kippur, so I'm going to share with you guys some Yom Kippur information and character development specifically for Yom Kippur. So let's just do the last one here. Very, very beautiful. Let's just do this in English. Anyone want to get a volunteer? Want to read number 4?
Which side?
Yeah, go for it.
A Baal Teshuvah should not consider himself distant from the level of the righteousness because of the sins and transgressions that he committed. This is not true. He's beloved and desirable before the Creator as if he never sinned. Furthermore, he has a great reward, for he has tasted sin and yet separated himself from it, conquering his evil inclination. Our sages declared, in the place where Baalei Teshuvah stand, even the completely righteous are not able to stand. The level of Baalei Teshuvah transcends the level of those who never sinned at all, for they overcame their evil inclination more.
Isn't that interesting? It's a famous line. The makom shabali tshuva omdim, where a Baal Tshuva stands, not even a righteous person could stand in such a place. A Baal Tshuva is someone who previously was not committed to Torah and mitzvot and then becomes more in it and starts getting more serious about their Judaism. Think about that for a minute. Why is that person greater? Because they've had to overcome that much more. A person who was, let's say, raised in a family, in a social milieu which was very conducive to spiritual growth, to observing the Torah and the mitzvot, it's going to be easier for that person. It's not easy. Okay, no one has it easy. It's still difficult even if you're raised in the most observant religious family. But it's a lot easier for that person than someone who's coming in from the outside and taking on a mitzvah or two. That's considered a very, very high-level person. And therefore the Rambam says that someone who became should not look back at their past and say, that God is still angry with me because I used to do this and I used to do that. No, just the opposite. He's even that much more beloved and desirable before Hashem, as though that person never sinned. Very beautiful. And take a look at the last paragraph. Continue, doing great. Sure. The manner
of Baalei Teshuvah is to be very humble and modest. If fools shame them because of their previous deeds, saying to them, yesterday you would commit such and such sins, yesterday you would commit these and these transgressions, they will pay no attention to them. On the contrary, they will hear this abuse and rejoice, knowing that it is a merit for them. Whenever they are embarrassed for the deeds they committed and shamed because of them, their merit increases and their level is raised. It is an utter sin to tell a Baal Teshuvah, remember your previous deeds, or to recall them in his presence to embarrass him, or to mention the surrounding circumstances or other similar matters so that he will recall what he did. This is all forbidden. We are warned against it within the general category of verbal abuse which Torah has warned us against. As Leviticus 25:17 states, a man should not mistreat his colleague.
So this is interesting. We're just saying how beloved a Baal Tshuva is in God's eyes. And now he turns to people. And if a person would go to a Baal Tshuva and say, and this, by the way, I've seen this, you think you're such a holy person? I remember, back when you were such a party animal and now you're pretending to be such a holy religious person. So, by the way, psychologically, why does that happen? It happens often. It probably never happens with someone who is not Jewish, who's saying something to, because you would be respectful of your own religious practices.
Their own insecurities.
Usually. They're usually having a problem with their friend, their relative, who's becoming more observant. And they can't really handle it, so they kind of bring them down a notch. Come on, you're not really that religious. What's that?
I've seen it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So now what the Rambam does, he turns to the two people involved. First, he turns to the person who just got hit over the head with this and says that what? Whenever they're embarrassed for the deeds they committed in shame, their merit increases. Don't listen to this person. Don't worry about what they're saying. This person is only increasing your merit. Now, how is this person increasing your merit? Because they're just demonstrating how far you've traveled, how great you've come. By mentioning all these, your not so wonderful past. Okay, they're doing it to be mean-spirited, or they're doing it to help themselves deal with their stuff. But you should understand that they're just underlying how far you've come. Now he turns to the person who's making the comment and says, it's an utter sin to do that. Don't think that's okay to do. Remember your previous deeds. To say something like that or to recall them in the presence of someone else to embarrass them, that's 100% forbidden. Why? Because it comes under the prohibition of verbal abuse. Lo sanu ish es imo es achiv. A man should not mistreat his brother. It's called verbal abuse. It's onaz dvarim, really. That's the term in Hebrew. Anything that you say to someone that can cause shame, embarrassment, worry, distress is a Torah prohibition. You have to be very, very careful the way we speak to other people. The Torah considers that a serious offense. And the Rambam is saying that even though they wouldn't consider it abusing the other person by reminding them how much they partied in college and like you think you're so holy now. But it does come under that category because it's trying to trying to bring the person down. And then to the person who's receiving it, the Rambam is giving like a little, you should feel good about it. Yeah.
What would happen if someone was saying, instead, in a way, remember all those things you did in the past, but now look where now you're in such a amazing place. Would that still be
all depends on the tone and the intent. It all depends, because that might be an underhanded way of saying the same thing.
What if it was
reminding people what he did, but you're so great today. So they don't look like such a jerk for saying it. But if it's really being done...
It was saying, you've got such a far way, it's amazing.
You've come so far. It all depends on how it's said. The more it invokes the past, the worse it is. You know what I'm saying? But, in another sense, it could be paying the greatest compliment.
Right. If it's done in a completely different
That's why, when you get older and then you see a friend that you were used to cheat on tests with in elementary school or in high school, or used to, shoplift, do something really not great. And then that friend sees you later, and now you become a more refined individual. And you become successful in what you do, and you're a responsible citizen, you're upstanding citizen. And when you get a compliment from a friend like that, that's pretty amazing, It makes you feel that much greater because you were with that person, in the trenches, so to speak, when things weren't so great. That's why I think compliments paid by old friends are always very, very meaningful. Because they were kind of there before you were really developed into the person you are now. And that always means that much more. It can work the opposite also. Some people really trail after approval of old friends. It means that much more. That they see me as a success,
High school reunions.
High school reunion, exactly. There was one thing that I was going to share with you. We'll finish with this. It's very much along the lines of this, and then we'll stop. Is a very beautiful letter that the Rambam wrote to a student of his, whose name was a simple Jew in Baghdad, whose name was Joseph ibn Gabir. Now, Joseph ibn Gabir was not knowledgeable in Judaism, and he didn't know any Hebrew. And he was unable to read the Rambam's major work on Jewish law. He lived at the same time as the Rambam. It was written in Hebrew, the Mishnah Torah. So Gabir asked the Rambam to give him a little encouragement because and this is what he wrote, and he could only understand Arabic. That's where he was living. So the Rambam says, first of all, I must tell you, may the Lord keep and increase your welfare, that you are not justified in regarding yourself as an am haaretz, an ignoramus. You are a beloved pupil. So is everybody who is desirous of studying even one verse or a single law. It also makes no difference whether you study in the holy language Hebrew, or in Arabic, the vernacular, or in the Aramaic, the language of the Talmud. It matters only whether it is done with understanding. But of the man who neglects the development of his spirit, it is said he has despised the word of the Lord. This applies to a man who fails to continue his studies, even if he has become a great scholar, for the advancement of learning is the highest command. I say, therefore, in general, that you must not belittle yourself, nor give up the intention of improving. There are great scholars who did not begin their studies until an advanced age, and who became scholars of distinction in spite of this. This is like one little segment of the letter. He had these magnificent letters that the Rambam wrote to people. This is like when people wrote letters, you know. There's actually an amazing letter, the original manuscript of the letter that the Rambam wrote to his brother, who supported him before the Rambam ended up having to support himself. He was a physician. It's in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And it was a letter that he wrote to his brother urging him not to go on a certain trading expedition in the Indian Ocean. And his brother went and unfortunately died in that voyage. And as a result, he had to basically support himself afterwards. He never took any money from the community. He became a doctor for the Sultan. He was a very prominent physician. I mean, he was a genius, the Rambam. And this is what he wrote to a student who didn't really know much about Judaism. And it doesn't matter what language you know. What matters is your intent, how much effort you put in. And I think, I don't know, I was thinking about that in terms of all this. Somebody who didn't start out that way, but tries their best. That's really what it's all about. And since this is the last class before Rosh Hashanah, I wish you all with that a K'tiva v'chatima tova. All of us should be blessed with a good new year. And the merit, the zechut of our class should be Aliyat Neshama for
Chana Esther Bat Zipporah.
Chana Esther Bat Zipporah and a refuah shlema for Ilan ben Hilda, and also actually 1 second for Yehuda ben Freda and Levi ben Sarah Razel.